is not going anywhere. And the manifestations of his power is going to manifest in the lives of his people. So we can trust and depend that because we serve an everlasting God, that those things that concern us is going to concern him. And all we got to do is stay in position and not move, but be steadfast, trusting and believing that we're going to see God do what he promised to do. There's a phrase that I like to say, and it's do it God. Do it God for me. Because if God be for you, who can be against you? What can be against you? Well, nothing can come against the power and the authority of God. I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. And sometimes what you got to understand about grace is, and going through, we are all going to experience seasons. Every season is going to come. It don't matter your title. It don't matter how good you are. It don't matter how smart you are. It don't matter how much money you got. You're going to endure a hard season. The Apostle Paul was doing his work, but he endured some things, and he started to be reminded of all of the things that God had allowed him to see and be a part of and to be a voice. And he was doing some good works. But in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, and I'm going to start at verse 7, he began to say, I've seen some things, right? I've experienced some things, but I don't want to think more highly of myself than I ought to. So he started to confess, it is God that is greater in me than me that is within myself. And he was reminded of this thing. So sometimes you got to understand situations come in our lives, yes, because of sin, but sometimes we're going to have a thorn in our flesh that is not going to be removed. There's going to be some things that we've got to do. There are going to be some things that we've got to endure. There are going to be some things that are going to come up and remind us that it is by the grace of God that we are standing. It is by the grace of God that we are able to breathe. It is by the grace of God that we are able to speak. And see, Paul had this thorn, and he said, I begged the Lord 3 times, take it away, God. Remove it from me, God. I don't want it, God. This is too painful, God. Matter of fact, take the whole bag, God. Away from me, God. Because this is too much pressure for me to bear. But see, what began to happen is that in the midst of pressure, promise can be produced. In the midst of pressure, the Lord's glory can be revealed. And the word of God says that God didn't tell him he was going to remove the stone. But what he said was, my grace is sufficient. So I want to tell you today, rise up. Even when you are surrounded by stones, even when they told you what you can't be, what you can't do, what you can't have, what your children ain't going to do. Don't worry about what you're going through, but be reminded that even when you're sitting down, my grace is sufficient for you to get up. Even when you're laying down, my grace is sufficient for you to get up. We've got to understand we're kingdom citizens. And see, we got rights as a kingdom citizen. Our everlasting God is the Father of all things. So what he says, we can have. And even sometimes